At 32 years old, Adrian Blake stood in his kitchen watching a billionaire wash his daughter's dishes and realized with crushing certainty that he'd been in love with her for half his life. The woman who owned skyscrapers wore his dead wife's apron. The woman who commanded boardrooms sang lullabies to his 6-year-old. And tonight, she was leaving for Seattle, forever. He had 2 hours to find the courage he'd buried 6 years ago, or lose the only future that mattered. This is a story about the single father who loved in silence, the billionaire who waited in the dark, and the little girl who understood what the adults were too afraid to say. Watch until the very end to see how it all unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain started just after midnight. Adrian Blake stood at his bedroom window, watching water streak down the glass in crooked lines that caught the streetlight outside. Behind him, Sophie's baby monitor crackled with the soft sound of her breathing. 6 years old and she still couldn't sleep through a thunderstorm without the nightlight shaped like a rabbit. The one Vivian had bought her last Christmas. Everything in this house had Vivian's fingerprints on it. The monitor. The curtains in Sophie's room, pale yellow because Vivian said it would help her wake up happy. The coffee maker downstairs that could apparently do 17 different things Adrian would never understand. Even the apron hanging on the kitchen hook, the one that said "World's Okayest Cook" in faded letters, belonged to a woman who didn't live here but somehow never left. Adrian pressed his forehead against the cold window and closed his eyes. 32 years old. Single father. Widower. Those were the words people used when they talked about him, like his whole identity could fit in 3 clinical terms. They weren't wrong, exactly. Just incomplete, because they left out the most important part, the truth he'd been choking on for years. He was in love with his best friend, the billionaire best friend who was leaving Portland in 3 weeks. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Vivian. Can't sleep. You up? His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He could see her in his mind, curled up in that ridiculous penthouse downtown, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the whole city look like a toy set. She'd be wearing those soft gray pajamas she pretended weren't cashmere, drinking tea from the mug Sophie had painted for her birthday. The mug was lopsided and the paint was already flaking off, but Vivian used it every single night. Adrian. Yeah. Storm woke me. Vivian. Liar. You've been awake since 10. He smiled despite himself. She knew him too well, had known him since they were kids, back when her last name meant old money, and his meant nothing at all, before the empire she'd built, before the wife he'd buried. Adrian. Sophie okay? Vivian. Check the monitor. He glanced at the small screen. Sophie had kicked off her blanket again, one small foot dangling off the edge of the mattress. The rabbit nightlight cast soft shadows across her face. Vivian. See? She's fine. Stop worrying. Adrian. It's my job. Vivian. Your job is to get some sleep. Mine too. Neither of us is very good at it. There was a pause. He watched the 3 dots appear and disappear, twice, before her next message came through. Vivian. I'm coming over. Adrian. Viv, it's almost 1 a.m. Vivian. So? I have a key. Adrian. You live across the city. Vivian. I live 20 minutes away and I haven't seen Sophie in 2 whole days. That's unacceptable. He should have said no. Should have reminded her that she had an early meeting tomorrow, that he was perfectly capable of handling a thunderstorm without backup, that showing up at a single man's house in the middle of the night looked like something it wasn't, except it was exactly what it looked like. And that was the problem. Adrian. Fine, but I'm not making coffee. Vivian. Already brewing it at your place. I started the machine from my phone 10 minutes ago. Of course she did. Because Vivian Sinclair thought of everything, controlled everything, fixed everything, except the one thing that actually mattered. 23 minutes later, he heard her key in the lock. She came in quietly, shaking rain from her dark hair, wearing jeans and an old Stanford sweatshirt that had definitely belonged to him once upon a time. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that screamed billionaire CEO who just closed a deal with Singapore last week. Just Vivian, looking tired and real and heartbreakingly familiar. You didn't have to come, Adrian said from the kitchen doorway. She looked up at him and smiled, the kind of smile that made his chest hurt. Yes, I did. Sophie's asleep. I know. Vivian set her bag down on the counter, pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet without looking, poured coffee like she'd done it 1,000 times. Because she had. I came for you. The words hung in the air between them. Thunder rolled overhead, rain hammered against the windows. And Adrian stood there in his kitchen at 1 in the morning, watching a woman worth $9 billion hand him a mug with a chipped handle, and wondered how much longer he could keep lying to both of them. You should have stayed home, he said quietly. You've got that presentation in 6 hours. Vivian leaned against the counter, wrapping both hands around her mug. I'll manage. You always do. Not always. Her eyes met his over the rim of her coffee, dark and unreadable. Sometimes I fail spectacularly. He wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to cross the 3 feet of tile between them and touch her face, push that wet strand of hair behind her ear, say all the things he'd been swallowing for 6 years. Instead, he took a sip of coffee that burned all the way down and tasted like cowardice. How's the Seattle thing going? The question came out rougher than he'd intended. Vivian's expression flickered. It's going. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. She set her mug down, folded her arms across her chest. The board wants a decision by the end of the month. 3 weeks. And? Adrian heard himself ask. And I don't know. Vivian's voice cracked just slightly on the last word. It's the biggest expansion we've ever attempted. 12 offices across Asia Pacific, 40,000 new jobs. It's everything I've been working toward for a decade. Sounds like you should take it. It sounds like I should. She looked away toward the dark window where rain kept falling. But every time I try to say yes, I keep thinking about Sophie's dance recital next month, and the camping trip we planned for August, and the fact that I won't be here when she starts first grade. Adrian's throat tightened. She'll understand. Will she? Vivian turned back to him, and there was something fierce and fragile in her eyes. She's 6 years old, Adrian. She asked me last week if I was going to be her mom someday. Do you know what that did to me? He did. Because Sophie had asked him the same question 2 months ago, late at night when she couldn't sleep, her small voice carrying the weight of every loss she'd already survived at 6. Why isn't Miss Vivian my mom? She does all the mom things. Adrian had fumbled through some explanation about how families came in different shapes, how love didn't require labels, how Vivian would always be important to them, no matter what. Sophie had nodded like she understood, but her next words had gutted him. I think she'd be a really good mom, don't you? Yeah, he thought Vivian would be an incredible mother. He thought about it every single time she walked through his door. What did you tell her? Adrian asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vivian's laugh was hollow. I told her I loved her more than anything in the world, which is true, and completely beside the point. She picked up her mug again, then set it back down without drinking. I can't keep doing this, Adrian. His heart stopped. Doing what? Pretending. The word fell between them like a stone. Coming here every night, cooking dinner, reading bedtime stories, playing house with a family that isn't mine. Viv says, no, let me finish. She pushed off the counter, started pacing the small kitchen. Do you know what my therapist said last week? She said I've built my entire life around someone else's family, that I've put my own happiness on hold for so long, I don't even recognize what it looks like anymore. Boy. Assez. Adrian set his mug down before he could drop it. So the Seattle job is a way out, Vivian finished. A clean break. A chance to finally stop waiting for something that's never going to happen. The words hit him like a fist to the sternum. You're running away. I'm surviving. Her eyes flashed. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Vivian stopped pacing, turned to face him fully. Because staying here being close to you and Sophie every single day, while knowing I'll never actually be part of this, that's not living, Adrian. That's slow suffocation. The truth of it burned between them. 6 years. 6 years since Emily died. Since Adrian's world had collapsed into a black hole of grief and single fatherhood and desperate survival. 6 years since Vivian had quietly stepped in, not as a replacement, but as something else entirely. Something he'd never found the words to name. She'd been there the night Sophie came home from the hospital, 3 months old and screaming with colic. She'd been there through every fever, every nightmare, every milestone Emily should have seen. She taught Sophie how to ride a bike, how to braid hair, how to stand up to the boys who said girls couldn't play soccer. She'd rearranged her entire company's headquarters just so she could work from Portland 3 days a week. She'd turned down marriage proposals from men who actually deserved her, men who could offer her the family she clearly wanted. She'd given Adrian 6 years of unwavering devotion, and he'd given her nothing back except silence and cowardice and the same excuse every single time. "I'm not ready." "Say something," Vivian whispered. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. The words were right there, crowding his throat, desperate to break free. 3 words that would change everything. 3 words he'd been too terrified to speak since the night he'd realized the truth. Standing in this exact kitchen, while Vivian taught Sophie how to make pancakes and sunlight caught in her hair like a promise. "I love you." Instead, what came out was, "I don't want you to go." Vivian's face crumpled for just a second before she caught herself. "That's not enough." "I know." "Then give me more." Her voice broke. "Give me literally anything, Adrian, because I have spent years loving you in silence, and I can't do it anymore. I can't watch you date other women who mean nothing. I can't pretend it doesn't destroy me every time you pull away. I can't keep being the person who's always here, but never enough." "You are enough," he said desperately. "You're everything." "Then why won't you let me in?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Because he was afraid. Because loving Vivian meant betraying Emily's memory. Because if he opened that door, if he let himself want the future, he could see so clearly every time Vivian smiled at Sophie, he'd be admitting that some part of him had stopped grieving, stopped being the devoted widower, stopped living in the past. And he didn't know who he was without the grief. "I can't lose you," Adrian said, and it came out strangled. "You already have." Vivian grabbed her bag off the counter, shoulders shaking. "You lost me the day you decided fear mattered more than us." "Vivian, wait." But she was already moving toward the door, and Adrian just stood there like an idiot, frozen by 6 years of habit. 6 years of keeping his distance. 6 years of convincing himself that silence was safer than honesty. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "I'll still come to Sophie's recital," she said without turning around. "And I'll make sure the transition to Seattle is gradual, so she doesn't feel abandoned. But after that, don't." The word ripped out of him. "Please don't do this." Vivian looked back over her shoulder, and her eyes were wet. "I'm not doing anything, Adrian. You did this 6 years ago, when you decided I wasn't worth the risk." Then she was gone, and Adrian was alone in his kitchen at 2 a.m. with cold coffee and the sound of rain, and the crushing certainty that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. He didn't sleep, just stood there at the counter until dawn broke gray and miserable over Portland, thinking about all the things he should have said, all the chances he'd wasted, all the moments he could have been brave and chosen to be afraid instead. Around 6, he heard Sophie padding down the stairs. She appeared in the doorway wearing her bunny pajamas, hair sticking up in 12 directions, clutching the stuffed elephant Vivian had given her when she was 3. "Morning, baby," Adrian said, forcing his voice steady. Sophie climbed onto the stool across from him, squinting against the kitchen light. "You look sad." "Just tired." "That's what grown-ups say when they're sad." She swung her feet, considering him with those sharp 6-year-old eyes that saw too much. "Did Miss Vivian leave?" "Yeah, she had work stuff." "She came last night, right?" "I heard her." Adrian nodded. "The storm woke her up. She wanted to check on you." "She always wants to check on me." Sophie traced patterns on the counter with one finger. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "Do you love Miss Vivian?" The question landed like a grenade. Adrian stared at his daughter, this tiny person who'd survived more loss than most adults, and realized he had 2 choices. He could lie, the way he'd been lying to himself for years, or he could finally tell the truth. "Yes," he whispered. "I love her very much." Sophie nodded, like this was old news. "Then why don't you tell her?" "It's complicated." That's what grown-ups say when they're being dumb. She hopped off the stool, grabbed her elephant. "Miss Vivian is going to move away to Seattle if you don't say something." "Who told you that?" "Nobody. I just know." Sophie looked up at him with devastating clarity. "And if she leaves, she's not coming back. Because she's tired of waiting." Adrian's chest clenched. "Sophie, you should tell her," his 6-year-old daughter said simply, "before it's too late." Then she padded back upstairs to get dressed for school, leaving Adrian alone with the worst truth of all. His daughter was right. Basen. The week that followed was a special kind of torture. Vivian didn't come by the house. Didn't text except for brief, polite messages about Sophie's upcoming dance recital. Didn't call. It was like someone had cut out the sun and replaced it with something dim and functional that provided light but no warmth. Sophie noticed immediately. "Where's Miss Vivian?" But she asked every single day, and every single day Adrian gave the same useless answer. "She's busy with work." On Thursday, Sophie came home from school crying. Adrian found her curled up on the couch, face buried in the cushions, shoulders shaking with the kind of sobs that meant something had broken inside. Hey, what happened?" He scooped her up, held her against his chest while she cried into his shirt. "Baby, talk to me." It took 10 minutes before she could speak. "Madison said, I don't have a real mom," Sophie hiccuped. "She said Miss Vivian doesn't count because she's not actually family." Adrian's vision went white at the edges. "Sophie, listen to me." He pulled back just enough to see her face, wiped tears away with his thumbs. "Madison is wrong. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who loves you, who stays. But Miss Vivian is leaving." "No," Adrian said, even though he had no right to promise anything. "She's not, eh? How do you know?" Because he was going to stop her, somehow. Even if it meant finally doing the one thing that terrified him more than anything else in the world, telling the truth. "I just do," he said. "Okay?" Sophie nodded against his chest, but she didn't stop crying. That night, after she finally fell asleep, Adrian sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone. The text sat in his drafts folder, half written and desperate. "I need to talk to you, please." He stared at it for 20 minutes before deleting the whole thing and typing something simpler. "Can we meet? Tomorrow?" The reply came 3 hours later, long after midnight. "Okay." They met at the coffee shop where they'd spent half their college years. Back when Vivian was studying economics and Adrian was drowning in pre-med courses he'd eventually abandoned for art school. The place looked exactly the same mismatched furniture, same indie music playing too loud, same smell of burnt espresso and old books. Vivian was already there when he arrived. She sat in the corner booth they'd claimed as theirs 15 years ago, wearing a black blazer and an expression that gave away nothing. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except the simple watch her grandmother had left her. She looked untouchable and exhausted in equal measure. Adrian slid into the seat across from her, hands shaking. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You said it was important." "It is." He took a breath. "Sophie came home crying yesterday." Vivian's composure cracked. "What? Why?" "Some kid at school told her she doesn't have a real mom, that you don't count." "Oh my God." Vivian's hands flew to her mouth. "Is she okay?" "No." Adrian leaned forward. "She's heartbroken. Because she thinks you're leaving because of her. That's not... I would never..." Vivian's voice splintered. "Adrian, I'm not leaving because of Sophie. I'm leaving because of us." "I know." "Do you?" Her eyes flashed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you called me here to guilt me into staying, to use Sophie as leverage. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Adrian looked at her. This woman who'd been his best friend since they were kids, who'd held his hand at Emily's funeral, who'd stayed up all night with a screaming infant while he fell apart in the next room, who'd built a billion-dollar empire and still found time to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs every Sunday morning. And he finally said the words he'd been choking on for 6 years. "I'm in love with you." The world stopped. Vivian went completely still, like someone had pressed pause on her entire existence. The coffee shop noise faded to static. Rain kept falling outside the windows, but Adrian couldn't hear it anymore. Couldn't hear anything except his own heartbeat and the tiny, desperate sound Vivian made when she tried to breathe. "What?" she whispered. "I'm in love with you," Adrian repeated, and now that he'd started, he couldn't stop. "I have been for years. Since before Emily died, if I'm being honest. I've been lying to myself, lying to you, hiding behind grief because I was too much of a coward to admit the truth." Vivian's hands were shaking. "Adrian, I know I don't deserve you. I know I've wasted years we could have had together. I know I've hurt you in ways I'll never be able to fix." His voice cracked. But I can't let you leave without telling you. I can't watch you walk away thinking you weren't enough because you're everything. You've always been everything. Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks. You don't mean that, she said brokenly. You're scared of being alone. You're panicking because I'm actually leaving. This isn't real. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. Then why now? Her voice rose, sharp with years of hurt. Why not last year? Why not 3 years ago? Why not the night I told you I loved you and you looked at me like I'd stabbed you? Adrian flinched. He remembered that night. Remembered the way Vivian's face had crumpled when he'd said nothing. Done nothing, let the confession die in the silence between them. Because I was an idiot, he said. Because I thought loving you meant betraying Emily. Because I convinced myself that staying stuck in the past was the same thing as being faithful to her memory. And now? Now I realize Emily would have hated what I've become. The truth burned coming out. She would have hated watching me turn into this half-alive ghost who's too afraid to be happy. She would have wanted me to move forward, to give Sophie a family, to let myself love again. I'm benching. Vivian closed her eyes. You can't just decide that because it's convenient. I'm not. Adrian reached across the table, caught her hand before she could pull away. Viv, look at me. She did, reluctantly. I have loved you since we were 22 years old, Adrian said, each word deliberate. I loved you when you helped me study for finals. I loved you at my wedding, even though I was marrying someone else. I loved you the night Emily died when you held me while I broke apart. I loved you every single time you walked into my house, like you belonged there. Because you do. You belong with me and Sophie. You always have. Stop, Vivian choked out. Please stop. I can't, because if I stop now, you'll get on that plane to Seattle, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I was too scared to fight for the only woman I've ever truly wanted. Vivian pulled her hand back, wrapped her arms around herself. This isn't fair. None of it is fair, but it's true. She was quiet for a long time, staring down at the table, tears dripping onto the scarred wood. When she finally looked up, her expression was devastated. I've waited 6 years to hear you say that, she whispered. Do you know what that did to me? Watching you date other women? Watching you keep me at arm's length while letting me raise your daughter? I stayed because I hoped. Because some stupid part of me believed that if I was patient enough, good enough, present enough, you'd finally see me. I see you, Adrian said desperately. I've always seen you. No. Vivian stood up, grabbed her bag. You saw someone convenient, someone safe. Someone who'd stick around no matter how badly you treated her. That's not true, isn't it? She looked at him with eyes that held 6 years of hurt. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a man who only cares when he's about to lose something, not because he actually wants it. Then she walked out of the coffee shop, and Adrian sat there alone in their corner booth, drowning in the worst realization of his life. She was right. He'd only found his courage when she'd finally run out of patience. And maybe that meant he didn't deserve her at all. Adrian sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours after Vivian left, staring at the cold cup in front of him until the barista asked if he needed anything else. He didn't. What he needed had just walked out the door, and no amount of overpriced espresso was going to fix that. When he finally made it home, Sophie was sitting on the front steps waiting for him. You're not supposed to be outside by yourself, he said, exhaustion making his voice flat. Mrs. Chen is watching from her window. Sophie pointed to their neighbor's house, where, sure enough, the elderly woman gave a little wave. Did you tell her? Adrian sat down beside his daughter on the cold concrete. Tell who what? Miss Vivian, that you love her. He should have been surprised that Sophie knew exactly where he'd been, what he'd been trying to do. But his daughter had always been uncomfortably perceptive, even as a toddler. Emily used to joke that Sophie could read minds. Yeah, Adrian said. I told her. And? And she left anyway. Sophie was quiet for a moment, swinging her legs. Then, did you mean it? What? When you said you loved her, did you actually mean it? Or were you just trying to make her stay? The question hit him like a slap. 6 years old, and she'd cut straight to the thing Vivian had been asking. The doubt that had been written all over her face when she walked away. I meant it, Adrian said quietly. I've meant it for a long time. Then you have to try again. Sophie, it's not that simple. Yes, it is. She turned to look at him with those serious dark eyes. Miss Vivian thinks you only want her because she's leaving. So you have to show her that's not true. You have to prove it. How? Sophie shrugged. I don't know. You're the grown-up. Figure it out. Ma'am, iti hatagi. Then she stood up and went inside, leaving Adrian sitting on the steps alone, wondering when his 6-year-old had become wiser than he was. The answer came to him 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, while he was lying awake staring at the ceiling. It wasn't elegant. It probably wouldn't work. But it was the only thing he could think of that might actually prove to Vivian that he meant what he'd said. He called his sister the next morning. You want me to what? Rachel's voice crackled through the phone, thick with sleep. Watch Sophie for a few days. Maybe a week. Adrian, it's 6 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry, but I need your help. There was a long pause, then the sound of Rachel sitting up in bed. What's going on? He told her everything. The confession in the coffee shop, Vivian's rejection, Sophie's brutal assessment of the situation. When he finished, Rachel was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Rach? I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out if you've completely lost your mind or if this is actually the sanest thing you've done in 6 years. That's not helpful. You told her you loved her and she walked away, Adrian. What makes you think showing up again is going to change anything? Because she was right, he said. I only fought for her when I was about to lose her. I need to prove that I want her even when she's not leaving, even when there's no crisis, even when it's just ordinary life. Rachel sighed. And you think following her to Seattle is going to accomplish that? I think it's a start. Another pause, then, when do you need me? Adrian closed his eyes in relief. Tomorrow? You're insane. Probably. Sophie's going to have questions. I know. I'll talk to her. Adrian? Rachel's voice softened. Don't screw this up. That woman has put up with more than anyone should have to. If you're going to do this, you better mean it all the way through. I do. Good. Because if you hurt her again, I'm going to drive up there and kill you myself. The conversation with Sophie went better than he'd expected. You're going to Seattle? She looked up from her cereal, spoon halfway to her mouth. Just for a few days. Aunt Rachel is going to stay with you. To see Miss Vivian? Yeah. Sophie considered this, chewing slowly. Then she nodded. Okay. That's it? Just okay? You're doing what I said, trying again. She went back to her cereal like they'd just discussed the weather. When are you leaving? Tomorrow morning. Are you going to bring her back? Adrian crouched down beside her chair. I'm going to try. But Sophie, I need you to understand something. Miss Vivian might say no. She might not want to come back, even if I ask. She will. How do you know? Sophie set down her spoon and looked at him with that unnerving 6-year-old certainty. Because she loves us. She's just waiting for you to be brave enough to love her back. Out of the mouths of children, his mother would have said. And maybe she would have been right. Adrian caught a flight to Seattle the next afternoon. He didn't call ahead, didn't warn Vivian he was coming. Partly because he was afraid she'd tell him not to, and partly because he had no idea what he was going to say when he got there. The Seattle office of Sinclair Enterprises took up 12 floors of a glass tower downtown, all sharp edges and modern architecture that screamed success. Adrian stood on the sidewalk across the street for 10 minutes, staring up at the building, trying to convince himself this wasn't the worst idea he'd ever had. His phone buzzed. Rachel. Sophie wants to know if you've chickened out yet. Adrian. Tell her I'm working on it. Rachel. She says you have to actually go inside the building. Standing outside looking at it doesn't count. Adrian. How does she know I'm standing outside? Rachel. She's 6, not stupid. Also, she says Miss Vivian is probably on the 47th floor because that's where the executive offices are. Adrian. Why does my daughter know the floor layout of Sinclair Enterprises? Rachel. Because she pays attention. Now get in there before I have to explain to her why her father is a coward. Adrian pocketed his phone and crossed the street. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. A security desk sat near the elevators, manned by a guy who looked like he ate protein powder for breakfast. "Can I help you?" The guard's eyes swept over Adrian's jeans and worn jacket, clearly categorizing him as not belonging here. "I'm here to see Vivian Sinclair." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then I can't let you up." Adrian had expected this. "Can you at least tell her I'm here? Miss Sinclair doesn't take unscheduled visitors." "I'm not a visitor. What was he exactly?" Friend felt insufficient. Ex-best friend felt pathetic. The man she probably never wanted to see again felt accurate but unhelpful. "Just tell her Adrian Blake is downstairs." Moss. The guard looked unconvinced, but he picked up the phone. Adrian couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched the guy's expression shift from bored to confused to something that might have been surprised. When he hung up, he was looking at Adrian differently. "Top floor," the guard said, nodding toward the elevators. "She'll meet you there." Wine gate. The elevator ride took 47 floors and felt like diving underwater. Adrian's ears popped, his heart hammered against his ribs. By the time the doors opened, he was pretty sure he was having a heart attack. Vivian was waiting in the hallway. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look severe and untouchable. But her eyes gave her away. They were red-rimmed and exhausted, like she hadn't slept since the coffee shop. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "I needed to see you. You saw me 3 days ago. I believe I made my position clear." "You did." Adrian stepped out of the elevator. "And you were right. About all of it." Vivian's jaw tightened. "If you came here to apologize again." "I didn't." He took a breath. "I came here to tell you something I should have said years ago, but I was too scared and too stupid to figure out." Adrian, when Emily died, I convinced myself that grief was the only thing keeping me connected to her. That if I stopped hurting, if I let myself be happy, it would mean I'd forgotten her. That I'd betrayed what we had. Vivian's expression flickered, but she didn't interrupt. "So I held on to the grief like a life raft," Adrian continued. "I made it my identity. The widower. The single dad. The guy who'd lost everything and was just barely surviving. And you know what the worst part is? It wasn't even about Emily. It was about me being too afraid to live again." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked me why now. Why I finally said something after 6 years of silence. And I need you to understand, it's not because you're leaving. It's because Sophie came home crying about not having a real mother, and it broke something open inside me. All these years, I've been so focused on protecting her from more loss that I never stopped to think about what I was keeping from her." "What are you keeping from her?" "A family." The word came out raw. "A complete family. The kind where she doesn't have to explain why the woman who raised her isn't actually her mom. Where she doesn't have to defend our relationship to kids at school. Where she can just be a normal kid with 2 parents who love her." Vivian's eyes went glassy. "You can't use Sophie to..." I'm not using her. I'm telling you the truth." Adrian moved closer, close enough to see the pulse hammering in her throat. "I love you, Vivian. Not because it's convenient. Not because I'm afraid of being alone. I love you because you're the first person I think about in the morning and the last person I think about at night. Because you make Sophie laugh in a way no one else can. Because you've seen me at my absolute worst and you stayed anyway. Because when I imagine the future, you're in every single part of it." A tear slipped down Vivian's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "You don't get to show up here and say these things." "I know. You don't get to make me hope again." "I know that too." "Then why are you here?" Her voice broke. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because I'm done being afraid." Adrian reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Because you were right when you said I only fought for you when I was losing you. So I'm here now, when there's no deadline, no crisis. Just me, telling you that I choose you, that I want you. Not someday. Not when it's convenient, right now." Vivian stared at him, tears streaming freely now. "You can't just decide that." "Why not?" "Because people don't change that fast. Because you've spent 6 years proving you don't want this. Because I've already accepted the Seattle job and started making plans, and so unmake them. Adrian. Or don't. He tightened his grip on her hand. Take the job. Move to Seattle. Build your empire. I don't care where you do it, as long as I'm with you. She went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll move here if that's what it takes. Sophie and I will pack up and follow you to Seattle, to Singapore, to wherever the hell you need to be. Because my home isn't Portland. It's wherever you are. Vivian made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. You can't uproot Sophie's entire life. Watch me. You're being ridiculous. Probably. Adrian pulled her closer, until there was barely any space left between them. But I've spent 6 years being careful and rational and safe, and all it got me was lonely. So yeah, I'm being ridiculous. I'm flying across the country without a plan. I'm offering to move my entire life for a woman who might not even want me anymore. But at least I'm finally being honest. Vivian's breath hitched. This is insane. Is it working? She closed her eyes and more tears fell. I don't know what to do with this. You could start by telling me the truth. Adrian lifted his free hand to her face, wiping away tears with his thumb. Do you still love me? The question hung between them for 3 heartbeats. Then Vivian opened her eyes and whispered, I've never stopped. The words destroyed him in the best possible way. Adrian kissed her, not carefully, not tentatively. He kissed her like he'd been wanting to for 6 years, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like this was the only honest thing he'd done in half a decade. And Vivian kissed him back with 6 years of frustration and longing and hurt and hope all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. This doesn't fix everything, Vivian said against his mouth. I know. I'm still angry at you. You should be, and I'm terrified this is going to fall apart. Me too. Adrian pressed his forehead against hers. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Vivian pulled back just enough to look at him properly. Her mascara was smudged. Her perfect hair was coming loose. She looked nothing like the untouchable billionaire who'd met him in the hallway, and everything like the woman who'd sat in his kitchen at 2 a.m. drinking bad coffee. Sophie really came home crying? She asked quietly. Yeah. What did you tell her? That family isn't about blood. That you've always been part of ours, whether we had the right words for it or not. Fresh tears spilled over. I love that little girl so much it scares me. I know, she loves you too. She told me to come here. Vivian laughed through her tears. She did. Told me I was being dumb and that I needed to prove I meant it. Adrian smiled. She's 6, and she's already smarter than both of us combined. She gets that from her mother. The words were out before Vivian seemed to realize what she'd said. She froze, eyes going wide with panic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I know Emily was her mother. I wasn't trying to. Viv. Adrian caught her face in both hands. Emily was her mother. Past tense. You're her mother now. Present tense. And if you'll let me, I want to make that official. Vivian's breath caught. What? Marry me? The hallway went silent, except for the distant hum of the elevator and the sound of Vivian's sharp inhale. You can't be serious, she whispered. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Adrian, we literally just got together 5 minutes ago. We've been together for 6 years. We just finally stopped lying about it. He traced his thumbs across her cheekbones, feeling the dampness of her tears. I don't need time to know what I want. I've known since Sophie was 3 years old, and I watched you teach her how to tie her shoes. I've known since you stayed up all night when she had pneumonia. I've known since you rearranged your entire company so you could be in Portland 3 days a week. I've known, Vivian. I was just too much of a coward to do anything about it. This is crazy. Yeah. People will think we've lost our minds. Probably. Sophie. We'll be thrilled. Adrian smiled. Oh, trust me. She's been planning this in her head for 2 years. Vivian let out a shaky laugh. We should take it slow. Date properly. Figure out if we actually work as a couple before making any huge decisions. Okay. She blinked. Okay, yeah, we can do whatever you want. Date for a year, 2 years, 10 years. I don't care how long it takes, as long as you know where we're headed. And where's that? You, me, Sophie. A real family. The kind where we don't have to explain or justify or defend what we are to anyone. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, searching his face like she was trying to find the catch, the place where this fell apart. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Gupichi. I'm not saying yes to marriage right now. I'm saying yes to trying, to dating, to seeing if we can actually make this work outside of our heads. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been knotted tight for 6 years. I'll take it, but I'm keeping the Seattle job. Okay. And you're not moving here unless we've been together for at least 6 months, and you're absolutely sure it's what you want. Fair enough? And if this doesn't work, if we try and it falls apart, you have to promise me we'll still be friends, for Sophie's sake. Adrian hesitated, because that was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. How did you go back to being friends with someone you'd tasted, touched, wanted this badly? But Vivian was looking at him with such raw vulnerability that he found himself nodding. I promise. She let out a breath she'd been holding. Then yes, let's try. This time when Adrian kissed her, it was softer, slower, a beginning instead of an ending. When they broke apart, Vivian was smiling for the first time since he'd arrived. I can't believe you flew all the way here without calling first, she said. I can't believe you agreed to see me. The security guard said you looked pathetic. I had to make sure you weren't having a breakdown in my lobby. I was absolutely having a breakdown in your lobby. Vivian laughed and the sound went straight through him. You're ridiculous. You love me anyway. Unfortunately. But her eyes were warm when she said it. How long are you in Seattle? As long as it takes. Rachel's watching Sophie. Your sister is watching Sophie so you could chase me across the country? She said if I screwed this up again, she'd kill me. I like your sister. Everyone likes my sister. She's the functional one. Adrian tucked a loose strand of hair behind Vivian's ear. Do you have to work? Or can I take you to dinner? Vivian glanced back toward the executive offices, then at him. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Right, of course. I should let you cancel it. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. Done. Just like that? Just like that. Vivian laced her fingers through his. I've spent 6 years putting work first. I think I can take one evening off. They ended up at a small Italian place near Pike Place Market, the kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Nothing fancy. Nothing that screamed billionaire CEO on a date. Just two people sitting across from each other, trying to figure out how to be together after years of pretending they weren't supposed to be. This is weird, Vivian said halfway through her pasta. What is? Being here with you, like this, without Sophie as a buffer. Adrian set down his fork. Bad weird or good weird? I don't know yet. She took a sip of wine, considering, we've never really been alone together, have we? Not like this. There was always something else. School, Emily, Sophie, work. Some excuse not to look at each other too closely. Mom got some others. And now? Now I'm looking at you and realizing I have no idea how to do this. That makes two of us. Vivian smiled, but it was shaky around the edges. What if we're terrible at it? What if we've built this up in our heads for so long that the reality doesn't match? Then we'll figure it out. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Complicated, but simple. Adrian reached across the table, caught her hand. We love each other. We want the same things. Everything else is just logistics. Logistics like living in different cities? For now. Logistics like you having a 6-year-old daughter who's already been through too much upheaval? Who wants you to be her mom? Vivian's eyes went bright with tears again. She said that? Not in those exact words, but yeah, that's what she wants. Adrian squeezed her hand. What do you want, Viv? She was quiet for a long time, staring down at their joined hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to wake up in your house and not have to leave at midnight. I want to help Sophie get ready for school and not feel like I'm overstepping. I want to make decisions about her future without wondering if I have the right. I want to be a family, not just someone who's always visiting. Then let's do it. Adrian, I'm serious. Move back to Portland, or we'll move to Seattle. Or we'll figure out some hybrid where we split time between both cities until Sophie's older. I don't care about the logistics. I care about you being part of our lives officially instead of in the margins. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I have responsibilities, a company, investors, employees who depend on me. And you can do all of that from Portland. You've been doing it for years. The Seattle expansion is a job, Vivian, an important one, sure, but it's still just a job. Her expression shuddered. You're asking me to choose? No. Adrian leaned forward. I'm asking you to build something with me where you don't have to choose, where you can have both the career and the family, where you're not sacrificing one for the other. That's not realistic. Says who? You're a billionaire CEO who built an empire from scratch. If anyone can figure out how to have it all, it's you, man. Vivian pulled her hand back, wrapped both arms around herself. You're asking me to trust you with everything. My future, my heart, the family I've always wanted. And I want to, Adrian, but I'm scared. Of what? That you'll change your mind. That you'll wake up one day and realize this was all a mistake. That I'll give up Seattle and the expansion and everything I've worked for, and then you'll decide you're not actually ready. The fear in her voice was visceral, and Adrian felt it like a punch to the gut. Because she was right to be scared. He'd given her every reason not to trust him. I can't promise I'll be perfect, he said quietly. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say the wrong thing, or forget important dates, or struggle with the fact that Emily's still part of my past. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere. That I'm done running from this. That I want you in my life and Sophie's life permanently, in every possible way. Permanently, Vivian repeated, like she was testing the word. Permanently. She studied him for a long moment, and Adrian could see her weighing everything. The risk, the potential, the years of hurt against the possibility of something better. Finally, she nodded. Okay. I'll think about Portland, and the expansion, and how to make this work. She met his eyes. But I need you to understand something, Adrian. If we do this, if I reorganize my entire life to be with you, there's no going back. I can't survive losing you again. Or Sophie. I won't. You're not going to lose us. Promise me. I promise, Adrian said, and meant it with every cell in his body. They finished dinner and walked along the waterfront after, hands linked, watching the city lights reflect off the dark water. It was cold and starting to rain, but neither of them suggested going inside. It felt too fragile still, too new. Like if they stopped moving, the spell might break. When do you have to go back to Portland? Vivian asked. Tomorrow evening. Rachel can only watch Sophie for 2 days. That's not enough time. For what? To figure this out, to make a plan, to actually be together instead of just talking about it? Adrian stopped walking, turned to face her. Then come back with me. What? Come to Portland. Tomorrow. Stay for a few days. See what it's like when we're actually trying to build something instead of just existing in the same space. Vivian shook her head. I have meetings. Cancel them, Nitz. Adrian, I can't just... Yes, you can. He cupped her face in his hands. You're the CEO. You make the rules. So make a rule that says you get to take a week off to figure out your personal life. A week? A week. Hell, take 2 weeks. Take a month. Whatever you need to know, this is real. Vivian bit her lip, and he could see her running calculations in her head. Meetings she'd have to reschedule. Conference calls she'd have to move. The carefully constructed machine of her business empire that would have to run without her for a little while. Then her expression shifted, and Adrian saw the exact moment she decided to jump. Okay, she said, 1 week. Yeah? Yes, Vivian smiled, and it was tentative but genuine. But if Sophie decides she doesn't want me there, I'm leaving. She's going to lose her mind when she sees you. Promise? Promise. They flew back to Portland together the next day. Adrian watched Vivian sleep on the plane, curled up in the window seat with her head on his shoulder, and felt something shift in his chest. Like the last 6 years had been holding his breath, and he was finally allowed to exhale. He texted Rachel from the airport. Adrian, bringing someone home with me. Can you stay another hour? Rachel, is it her? Adrian, yeah. Rachel, finally. Sophie's going to freak out, in a good way. She wasn't wrong. They pulled up to the house just after 6. Through the window, Adrian could see Sophie sitting at the kitchen table with Rachel, working on homework. Normal. Ordinary. Home. You ready? He asked Vivian. She took a shaky breath. No, me neither. He squeezed her hand. Let's do it anyway. They walked up to the front door together. Adrian unlocked it, stepped inside, and called out, Sophie, we're home. The sound of a chair scraping back, small footsteps thundering through the hallway. Then Sophie appeared, eyes going wide when she saw who was standing next to her father. Miss Vivian. Vivian knelt down, meeting Sophie at eye level. Hi, sweetheart. Sophie looked between them, and Adrian could practically see the wheels turning in her 6-year-old brain. Then, without warning, she launched herself at Vivian, wrapping small arms around her neck and holding on like she'd never let go. You came back, Sophie whispered into Vivian's shoulder. Vivian's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Sophie tight. Yeah, baby, I came back. Are you staying? For a while. How long? Vivian pulled back just enough to see Sophie's face. How long do you want me to stay? Sophie didn't hesitate. Forever. And watching them together, his daughter and the woman he loved, holding on to each other like they'd both been waiting years for permission, Adrian felt the last piece of his broken heart finally click back into place. Rachel left 20 minutes later, giving Adrian a look that said, don't mess this up, and Vivian a hug that lasted just long enough to be meaningful. Then it was just the 3 of them in the house that had always felt incomplete, and suddenly the air was different, charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. Sophie refused to let go of Vivian's hand. Can we make dinner together? She asked, dragging Vivian toward the kitchen. Like we used to? Oh. Sure, sweetheart. Vivian glanced back at Adrian, and he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. They'd talked about logistics and feelings and future plans, but this was different. This was real life, happening right now, with no script and no safety net. Adrian followed them into the kitchen, watching as Sophie pulled out the step stool she used to reach the counter. The stool Vivian had bought her 3 years ago, painted with butterflies because Sophie had been obsessed with them that summer. What are we making? Vivian asked. Spaghetti. It's Wednesday. Right. Wednesday is spaghetti night. Vivian looked at Adrian. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't, he said, and meant it. They fell into a rhythm that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. Sophie chattered nonstop while Vivian chopped vegetables and Adrian boiled water, filling the silence with 6-year-old observations about school and her upcoming dance recital and how Mrs. Chen's cat had learned to open doors. Normal things. Ordinary things. The kind of domestic scene Adrian had stopped letting himself imagine years ago. Miss Vivian, Sophie said, struggling with a tomato that kept rolling away from her plastic knife. Yeah, baby. Are you and Daddy dating now? The tomato slipped from Vivian's hands and hit the cutting board with a wet thud. Adrian froze mid-stir, the wooden spoon suspended over the pot. Sophie looked between them, completely unfazed by the bomb she'd just dropped. Madison's mom says people date before they get married, so I was just wondering. Oh. Vivian shot Adrian a desperate look. He cleared his throat. Yeah, Soph, we're dating. Oh, okay. Sophie went back to attacking the tomato. Does that mean Miss Vivian is going to live here now? Not right away, Vivian said carefully. But I'm going to visit a lot more. Is that okay with you? Sophie stopped what she was doing and turned to face Vivian fully. Are you going to leave again? The question was quiet, but it carried the weight of every loss this kid had already survived. Adrian's hands tightened on the spoon. Vivian knelt down, meeting Sophie at eye level the way she always did. I'm not planning to go anywhere, sweetheart, but I need you to understand something important. Your dad and I are figuring this out together, and that means things might be different for a while. I might have to travel sometimes for work. But that doesn't mean I'm leaving you. It just means I'm trying to find the best way to be part of your family. Mom, yes. You're already part of our family, Sophie said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I know, but now we're making it official. What does official mean? Adrian watched Vivian struggle with how to explain something he barely understood himself. Finally, she said, "It means we stop pretending. It means when I come over, it's not just to visit. It's because this is where I belong." Bam. Sophie considered this, her little forehead scrunching up the way it did when she was thinking hard. Then she nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise." "Promise what?" "That you won't break Daddy's heart. He's been sad for a really long time. I don't want him to be sad anymore." Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Vivian's eyes went glassy with tears. "I promise," Vivian whispered. "I'm going to try my very best not to hurt either of you. Good." Sophie threw her arms around Vivian's neck again. "Because I love you." Vivian held her tight, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I love you too, baby. So much." They ate dinner at the small kitchen table. Sophie wedged between them, talking with her mouth full and getting sauce on her shirt. Adrian couldn't remember the last time a meal had felt this right. Even before Emily died, there had always been tension. The knowledge that they were playing roles, performing the script of a happy family without actually feeling it. But this was different. This was messy and imperfect and real. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Vivian everything that had changed in the 2 weeks since she'd last been over. New drawings on the fridge, the loose tooth that was definitely going to fall out tomorrow, the chapter book she was reading that had a princess who didn't need to be rescued. She rescues herself, Sophie explained seriously, and then she rescues the prince too because he got stuck in a tower. Smart princess, Vivian said. Yeah. Miss Chen at the library said I should read books about girls who don't wait around for boys to save them. Adrian caught Vivian's smile. Miss Chen had been saying that since Sophie was 4, and every time it made Vivian light up like someone had vindicated her entire worldview. Bath time came and went. Story time stretched longer than usual because Sophie kept asking for just one more chapter. Finally, at almost 9 o'clock, Adrian had to put his foot down. Bed, Soph, now. But Miss Vivian just got here. Miss Vivian will be here tomorrow, Adrian said firmly. And the day after that. But you still have school in the morning. Sophie's face lit up. She's staying tomorrow too? For the whole week, remember? The squeal Sophie let out probably violated several noise ordinances. She threw herself at Vivian one more time, extracted another promise that she'd be there for breakfast, then finally, let Adrian carry her to bed. He tucked her in, adjusting the covers the way she liked, turning on the rabbit nightlight. Daddy? Sophie's voice was sleepy now, the excitement finally catching up with her. Yeah, baby? I'm really glad you told her, that you loved her. Adrian smoothed hair back from her forehead. Me too. Mom would be happy. Yeah. The words stopped him cold. Sophie almost never talked about Emily. It hurt too much, and she was too young to really remember her anyway. Most of what she knew came from stories and photographs. You think so? Adrian managed. Yeah, because she loved you, and she'd want you to be happy. Sophie yawned, eyes already drifting closed. Plus, Miss Vivian is really pretty and nice, and she makes good pancakes. Those are definitely the most important qualifications. And, I know, right? Another yawn. Night, Daddy. Night, sweetheart. He stood there for a moment watching her breathe, trying to process the fact that his 6-year-old daughter had just given him permission to move on from her mother. Then he turned off the light and went back downstairs. Vivian was in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need to be washed. You don't have to do that, Adrian said. I know, I need something to do with my hands. She scrubbed at a plate that was already clean. Sophie asleep? Out cold. Today was a lot for her. For all of us. Vivian set down the plate, dried her hands on a towel. Adrian, I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be here. With you. Like this. She gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the life they were trying to build. 6 years I've been coming over here, but it always felt temporary. Like I was borrowing someone else's life. Now it's supposed to be mine too. And I don't know the rules anymore. Adrian crossed the kitchen, caught her hands in his. There are no rules. That's not helpful. Okay, then how about this? You can use any room in the house. You can cook whatever you want. You can rearrange the furniture if it makes you happy. You can stay up late or go to bed early. You can work from here or go into the office. You can do whatever feels right, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Vivian looked down at their joined hands. What if I mess it up? Then we'll fix it. What if I can't? What if I'm terrible at this whole domestic thing and Sophie realizes she doesn't actually want me here every day? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Adrian tugged her closer. Yes, I do. Because Sophie has wanted you here every day since she was old enough to understand what family meant. You're not some new person we're trying to fit into our lives, Viv. You're the missing piece we've been waiting for. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm scared. Good. Me too. He pressed his forehead against hers. But we're doing it anyway. They stood there in the kitchen for a long time, just holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the house settled around them. Eventually, Vivian pulled back. Where should I sleep? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications they probably weren't ready to unpack yet. Guest room, Adrian said. Unless you want... Guest room is good. Vivian nodded quickly. Yeah, let's not rush things. We've known each other for 15 years. And been together for 3 days. She smiled, but it was shaky. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I want to do this right. No skipping steps just because we're impatient. Adrian understood. They'd already broken every rule about how relationships were supposed to progress. The least they could do was try for some semblance of normal. Guest room it is, he said. But for the record, I'm a terrible roommate. I steal blankets and I snore. I already know that. Sophie told me years ago. Of course she did. Vivian laughed, and some of the tension dissolved. They said goodnight in the hallway upstairs, awkward and sweet, like teenagers figuring out how to navigate new territory. Adrian watched her disappear into the guest room, then went to his own bed and lay awake for hours, hyper-aware that she was just down the hall. The next morning, Sophie woke them both up at 6:30 by jumping on Vivian's bed. You stayed, she shrieked. You're really here. Adrian appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up, looking exhausted and amused. Soph, we talked about this. Inside voices before 7. But Miss Vivian is here. I'm aware. So are the neighbors. Vivian sat up, laughing despite the early hour. It's okay. I was awake anyway. That was a lie. She'd been dead asleep, dreaming about spreadsheets and board meetings, but Sophie didn't need to know that. They made breakfast together, pancakes, because apparently that was the required meal when Vivian stayed over. Sophie insisted on helping, which meant batter ended up everywhere except the pan. Adrian gave up trying to keep things clean and just handed out paper towels. You're going to be late for school, he warned Sophie. No, I won't. Miss Vivian can drive me. Both adults froze. I don't know if that's a good idea, Adrian started. Why not? She's driven me before. Yeah, but that was different. That was when she was just visiting. Sophie's face scrunched up in confusion. What's the difference? Good question. Adrian looked at Vivian, who looked equally lost. There is no difference, Vivian said finally. If it's okay with your dad, I'd love to take you to school. 20 minutes later, Adrian stood in the driveway watching Vivian buckle Sophie into the back seat of her car, some sleek hybrid thing that probably cost more than his house, and felt reality settling in. This was happening. Vivian was driving his daughter to school. She'd be picking her up later, making dinner again tonight, sleeping down the hall. She was moving into their lives, piece by piece, and he had no idea how to handle the enormity of it. Vivian caught him staring and walked over. You okay? Yeah, just weird seeing you two leave together. Good weird or bad weird? Good weird. He hesitated. What are you doing today? I have calls at 9 and 11. Then I thought I'd work from that coffee shop you like, the one with the terrible Wi-Fi. You don't have to stay local. I know you have an office downtown. I'm aware, but I also have a laptop and noise-canceling headphones, which means I can work from anywhere. She touched his arm. I'm choosing to work near you, Adrian. That's kind of the point. Right, yeah. He felt like an idiot. I'll be at the studio if you need anything. The art studio? Yeah, I've got 3 commissions due by next week and I've barely started. Vivian's expression shifted to something he couldn't quite read. Can I come see it sometime? Your studio, Sam? In all the years they'd known each other, Vivian had never asked to see where he worked. It felt too personal, too much like peeling back another layer when they were both trying to maintain some boundaries. Sure, Adrian said. Whenever you want. She smiled and kissed him quickly, casually, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Then she got in her car and drove away with his daughter. And Adrian stood there in the driveway feeling like his entire world had tilted on its axis. He made it to the studio by 8. The space was a converted garage 2 blocks from the house, stuffed with half-finished canvases and paint supplies, and the organized chaos that made sense only to him. He'd been working on a series of portraits, commissioned pieces from clients who wanted something more interesting than photographs. Normally, painting cleared his head. Today, he couldn't focus worth a damn. His phone buzzed around 9:30. Vivian. Sophie's teacher asked if I was her mom. I said not yet. Was that okay? Adrian stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Adrian. More than okay. Vivian. She seemed happy about it. The teacher, I mean. Said it was nice to finally meet me. Adrian. They know who you are? Vivian. Apparently Sophie talks about me a lot. Adrian. That doesn't surprise me. Vivian. It surprised me in a good way. He could picture her sitting in some coffee shop, smiling at her phone, while her laptop ran through whatever billion-dollar deal she was managing today. The contrast between her two worlds, ruthless CEO and woman who got nervous about school drop-off, never stopped being surreal. The day passed in a blur of phone calls and work, and the strange adjustment of knowing Vivian was somewhere in the city, living her life but tethered to his in a way she hadn't been before. She picked up Sophie from school, helped with homework, made dinner again, something involving chicken and vegetables that Sophie actually ate without complaint. It felt normal. Too normal. And that's what scared Adrian the most. 3 days in, the cracks started showing. It happened over something stupid, a disagreement about whether Sophie needed a jacket for school. Adrian said yes. Vivian said it was warm enough. Sophie stood between them, confused, waiting for someone to make a decision. She's going to be outside for recess, Adrian said, trying to keep his voice level. It's 50 degrees. It's going to be 60 by noon. Vivian held up her phone, showing him the weather app. She'll be fine. She gets cold easily. Oh, I know. I've been around for 6 years, Adrian. I know how Sophie's body works. The edge in her voice caught him off guard. I'm not saying you don't. Then what are you saying? That I don't get to make decisions about her because I'm not actually her parent? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Sophie tugged on Adrian's sleeve. Can't. And not wear it. They both looked down at her, then at each other. Vivian's jaw was tight. Adrian felt like an idiot. Yeah, Soph, he said quietly. That works. Sophie grabbed her jacket and backpack, clearly relieved to escape the tension. The door closed behind her in Vivian's car, and Adrian stood in the hallway feeling like he'd just failed some test he hadn't known he was taking. By the time Vivian got back from school drop-off, he'd worked himself into a spiral. We need to talk, he said as soon as she walked in. Vivian set down her bag, her expression carefully neutral. Okay. That thing this morning was stupid. I know. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. I was being controlling. You were being a parent. There's a difference. She leaned against the wall, looking exhausted. I think I'm still figuring out what my role is here, and sometimes I overstep. You're not overstepping. You have every right to make decisions about Sophie. Do I, though? Vivian's voice was quiet. Because legally, I'm nobody. Just your girlfriend who happens to live here part-time. I have no actual authority over anything. Adrian hadn't thought about it like that. The legal reality of their situation. The fact that if something happened, if he got in an accident, if there was an emergency at school, Vivian had zero rights when it came to Sophie. We can fix that, he said. How? Adoption, marriage, whatever makes sense. The words came out before he could think them through. I meant what I said in Seattle, Viv. I want you to be Sophie's mother officially, not just in our heads. Vivian's eyes went glassy. We've been together for 4 days. We've been together for 6 years. We just spent most of it lying about it. That's not how the courts will see it. I don't care how the courts see it. I care about what's right for Sophie. And what's right is having you be part of her life legally, so this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Adrian, I'm serious. We can start the process whenever you're ready. Adoption takes time anyway. By the time it's finalized, we'll have been officially together for months. Vivian pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. This is happening so fast. Only if you're counting from 4 days ago. If you're counting from the day we met, we're actually moving pretty slow. She laughed, but it was shaky. You're impossible. You love me anyway. Unfortunately, she dropped her hands, met his eyes. I do want that. The adoption. Being Sophie's mother for real. But I need more than 4 days to process what that means. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. They were learning how to fight, how to disagree without destroying things, how to navigate the murky water between friendship and partnership. It wasn't smooth. Adrian kept defaulting to making unilateral decisions because he'd been doing it alone for 6 years. Vivian kept pulling back, afraid of overstepping, afraid of claiming space she didn't think she'd earned. But they were trying. On day 5, Vivian's mother called. Adrian was in the kitchen when he heard Vivian's voice shift, going tight and formal in a way it never did with anyone else. Hi, Mom. He couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could read Vivian's body language, the way she paced, the way her free hand clenched and unclenched at her side. No, I'm not in Seattle. I'm in Portland. More talking from the other end, because I needed to take some personal time. Adrian moved closer, not quite eavesdropping, but not quite giving her privacy either. That's none of your business, Vivian said, her voice going cold. I'm 30 years old, Mother. I don't need your permission to make decisions about my personal life. The silence stretched out. Then Vivian's expression crumpled for just a second before she caught herself. I have to go, she said. I'll call you next week. She hung up and stood there, staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. You okay? Adrian asked. My mother wants to know why I turned down the Seattle position. You turned it down? Vivian looked up at him. I thought I told you. No. When did that happen? Well, 2 days ago. The board wasn't thrilled, but I explained that I could run the expansion remotely and they accepted it. She set her phone down. My mother thinks I'm making a mistake, that I'm throwing away my career for a man. Are you? No, I'm restructuring my priorities. There's a difference. Adrian crossed the kitchen, pulled her into his arms. What did she say? The usual, that I'm being reckless, that I barely know you, that this whole thing is going to blow up in my face and I'll regret giving up Seattle. Do you regret it? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then, ask me again in 6 months. Fair enough. She pulled back, wiping at her eyes. My mother has never approved of anything I've done. My career, my choices. The fact that I'm 30 and single with no kids. Finding out I'm dating a single father with a 6-year-old is probably going to send her into orbit. You don't have to tell her. Yes, I do. Because if this is real, if we're actually doing this, then I want everyone to know. My mother included. Even if she makes it difficult, especially then. Vivian straightened her shoulders. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to her expectations and failing. I'm done apologizing for wanting something different. Adrian kissed her forehead. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Yeah? Yeah. Sophie thinks so too. Sophie's 6. And smarter than both of us combined. Vivian smiled despite herself. Can't argue with that. That night, after Sophie went to bed, they sat on the couch together. Actually together, not on opposite ends like they'd been doing all week. Vivian curled into Adrian's side, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they just existed in the quiet for a while. This is nice, Vivian murmured. What is? This. Being here. Not having to leave at midnight. You never had to leave. Yes, I did. Because staying would have meant something we weren't ready to name. She tilted her head to look at him. I used to drive home and cry sometimes. Did you know that? Adrian's chest tightened. No. I'd spend hours at your house playing family, and then I'd get in my car and fall apart. Because I wanted it so badly, and I knew I couldn't have it. Viv, I'm not telling you to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to understand what it cost me to keep coming back. How much I loved you both, even when it hurt. Adrian tightened his grip on her. I'm sorry I put you through that. I know, and I forgive you. She closed her eyes. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this stops working, if you wake up one day and realize this was a mistake, you have to tell me immediately. Don't drag it out. Don't try to spare my feelings. Just be honest, even if it destroys me. But it's not going to stop working. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because I've spent 6 years trying to live without you, and it was miserable. I'm not making that mistake again. Vivian opened her eyes, and they were wet. I really want to believe you. Then believe me. She kissed him, soft and tentative, and Adrian felt the last of the walls between them start to crumble. They'd been holding back all week, trying to be careful, trying to do things right. But sitting here in the dark with Vivian in his arms, he realized that careful wasn't what they needed. They needed honest. And honest meant admitting that he wanted her in his bed, not down the hall. That he wanted to wake up next to her. That he was tired of pretending this was some casual experiment when they both knew it was forever. Come to bed with me, he said against her mouth. Vivian pulled back. Adrian, not for sex, just to sleep. I'm tired of being apart when we're in the same house. She studied his face, looking for the catch. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They went upstairs together, and Adrian felt like a teenager sneaking someone into his room. Vivian borrowed one of his t-shirts, disappeared into the bathroom to change. When she came out, she looked young and vulnerable and heartbreakingly beautiful. They got into bed on opposite sides, awkward and unsure. Then Vivian scooted closer, and Adrian pulled her against his chest, and suddenly it wasn't awkward anymore. It was exactly right. This is weird, Vivian murmured. Good weird? The best weird. She pressed her face into his shoulder. I can hear your heartbeat. Is that a problem? No, it's perfect. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in 6 years, Adrian didn't have nightmares. He woke up to sunlight streaming through the window and Vivian's hair in his face. She was still asleep, breathing soft and even, one hand curled against his chest. He lay there for a long time, just watching her, trying to memorize every detail. This was real. She was here. And somehow, against all odds, they were making it work. The door creaked open. Sophie stood in the doorway, eyes wide, taking in the scene. Adrian froze, waiting for questions or confusion or some kind of 6-year-old meltdown. Instead, Sophie just smiled. Does this mean Miss Vivian is really staying? She whispered. Adrian glanced down at the woman asleep in his arms, then back at his daughter. Yeah, Soph, I think she is. Good, Sophie said. Then she padded back out, closing the door behind her, leaving Adrian alone with the overwhelming certainty that his life had finally become something worth living. Vivian stirred awake 10 minutes later, blinking against the sunlight. It took her a moment to register where she was, and when she did, Adrian watched awareness wash over her face, followed immediately by panic. Sophie saw us, she said. I know. And? She asked if you were really staying. I said yes. Vivian pushed herself up on one elbow, studying his face. That's it? No questions about why we were in bed together? She's 6, not stupid. She knows what dating means. Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She seemed happy about it. Happy, Vivian repeated, like she was testing the word. Not confused or upset or happy, Adrian confirmed. Now stop overthinking and come back here. She did, settling back against his chest with a sigh. I'm going to be terrible at this. At what? Not catastrophizing every little thing. Probably. But I'll be terrible at making decisions without consulting you first, so we'll balance out. Vivian laughed, the sound vibrating against his ribs. Is that how relationships work? Mutual dysfunction? According to every couple I've ever met, yeah. They stayed in bed longer than they should have, talking about nothing important, work schedules and grocery lists and whether Sophie needed new shoes. Ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they were planning together, as a unit, instead of two separate people trying to coordinate around each other. When they finally made it downstairs, Sophie was eating cereal and watching cartoons with the volume too loud. "Morning, sweetheart," Vivian said, dropping a kiss on top of Sophie's head like she'd done it 1,000 times. "Morning, Miss Vivian." Sophie didn't look away from the TV. "Are you going to keep sleeping in Daddy's room?" Adrian choked on his coffee. "Maybe," Vivian said, her voice admirably steady. "Would that bother you?" Sophie shrugged. "Madison's mom's boyfriend sleeps over sometimes. She says it's normal when people love each other." "Madison has a lot of opinions about relationships for a 6-year-old, Adrian muttered. "She has 2 older sisters," Sophie explained, like that settled everything. Then she turned to look at Vivian seriously. "Do you love my daddy?" "Yes," Vivian said without hesitation. "Very much." "And he loves you?" "Yes, Soph," Adrian said. "I do." "Okay." Sophie went back to her cereal. Just checking. That was it. No dramatics, no tearful speeches about what it all meant, just a 6-year-old's practical acceptance that the adults in her life were figuring their stuff out, and as long as everyone was happy, she was fine with it. Adrian caught Vivian's eye across the kitchen and saw his own relief reflected back. The week turned into 2, then 3. Vivian's Seattle office learned to function without her physical presence. Her assistant started shipping documents to Portland instead of the downtown high-rise. Conference calls happened from Adrian's kitchen table while Sophie did homework and Adrian painted in the next room. It wasn't seamless. There were more fights, small ones mostly, about household logistics and parenting decisions, and the fact that Vivian worked 12-hour days and sometimes forgot to eat. Adrian learned that she was impossible when she was stressed, snapping at him over things that didn't matter and then apologizing an hour later. Vivian learned that Adrian shut down when he felt overwhelmed, going silent for hours instead of just saying what was wrong. But they were learning. 4 weeks in, the school called. Adrian was at the studio when his phone rang, and the name on the screen made his stomach drop. "Mr. Blake, this is Principal Morrison. Sophie's been in an incident." His heart stopped. "Is she hurt?" "No, she's fine physically. But there was an altercation with another student, and we need you to come pick her up." "What kind of altercation?" "Sophie hit another child. We can discuss the details when you arrive." Kusan. Adrian was already grabbing his keys. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He called Vivian on the way, hands shaking. "Sophie got in a fight," he said as soon as she picked up. "What? When?" Just now. The school called. I'm on my way there." "I'm coming too." "Viv, you don't have to." "She's my daughter too," Vivian said, and the words hit him square in the chest. "I'm coming. Meet you there." The principal's office felt exactly like Adrian remembered from his own childhood. Institutional furniture, motivational posters, the faint smell of floor wax and fear. Sophie sat in a chair that was too big for her, legs dangling, her face blotchy from crying. "Daddy," she said, and her voice cracked. Adrian crossed the room in 3 steps, pulling her into his arms. "Hey, baby, you okay?" Sophie nodded against his chest, but her shoulders were shaking. Vivian arrived 2 minutes later, slightly out of breath, her hair disheveled from running. She took one look at Sophie and dropped to her knees beside the chair. "What happened, sweetheart?" Principal Morrison cleared her throat from behind her desk. "Perhaps we should discuss this with the adults first." "I'd prefer to hear it from Sophie," Vivian said, not breaking eye contact with the little girl. The principal looked at Adrian, who nodded. Morrison sighed. "Sophie punched Marcus Henderson during lunch. Marcus ended up with a bloody nose. His parents are very upset." "I'm sure they are," Adrian said, "but I'm more interested in why it happened." Sophie's grip on his shirt tightened. Vivian took her small hand, squeezing gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" Vivian asked softly. Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. "He said mean things." What kind of mean things? About you. Sophie looked up at Vivian with red-rimmed eyes. He said you weren't a real mom, that you were just Daddy's girlfriend and you didn't count. And when I told him to stop, he said, his dad said you were probably just after our money, but we don't even have money. And then he laughed and said that's why you'd leave soon. Adrian felt rage spike through him, white-hot and dangerous. Beside him, Vivian had gone very still. So I hit him, Sophie finished, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Daddy. I know hitting is wrong, but he wouldn't stop. Principal Morrison shifted uncomfortably. While we understand Sophie was upset, violence is never an acceptable response to verbal conflict. We have a zero-tolerance policy. What's the school's policy on bullying? Vivian asked, her voice dangerously quiet. We take bullying very seriously. Do you? Because it sounds like this Marcus kid spent lunch period tearing apart a 6-year-old's family, and the only consequence is that Sophie's the one sitting in your office. Miss Sinclair, I understand you're upset, but you don't understand anything. Vivian stood up, and Adrian recognized the CEO voice, the one that made boardrooms go silent. This child was defending her family from targeted harassment. Where was the teacher supervising lunch? Where was the intervention before it escalated to physical contact? Morrison's jaw tightened. We can't monitor every conversation. Then maybe you should try harder. Vivian pulled out her phone. I'll be speaking to the school board about your supervision protocols. And Marcus Henderson's parents should know that if they want to pursue this further, they'll be dealing with my legal team. Because if their son learned to talk about families that way, it came from somewhere, and I'm very interested in having a conversation about where. Miss Sinclair, there's no need for threats. That's not a threat. That's a statement of fact. Vivian looked down at Sophie. My daughter was protecting what matters. I won't apologize for that, and neither will she. My daughter. Adrian saw Sophie's expression transform, the fear and shame melting into something else entirely. However, Vivian continued, her voice softening slightly, Sophie does need to understand that hitting isn't the solution. So here's what's going to happen. She'll write an apology for the physical altercation, not for defending me, but for using violence. And your school will implement better lunch supervision and a clear anti-bullying protocol, or I'll be moving Sophie to a private school that actually protects its students. Morrison looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Vivian's expression must have convinced her otherwise. I'll speak to the lunch supervisor, she said stiffly, and we'll be calling Marcus's parents as well to discuss his behavior. See that you do. They left the school 10 minutes later, Sophie walking between them, holding both their hands. Nobody spoke until they reached the parking lot. Am I in trouble? Sophie asked in a small voice. Adrian crouched down to her level. You shouldn't have hit him, Soph. That part was wrong, and you know it. I know. Fresh tears spilled over. But he was being so mean about Miss Vivian. I know, baby, and I love that you wanted to defend her. But we use words, not fists, remember? Sophie nodded miserably. Vivian knelt beside Adrian. Hey, look at me. Sophie did, reluctantly. Thank you, Vivian said quietly, for standing up for me, for our family. That took a lot of courage. But I hit him. Yeah, you did, and that was wrong. But you did it because you loved me, and that means everything. Vivian pulled Sophie into a hug. You don't have to fight my battles. Sweetheart, I'm pretty good at fighting them myself. I saw, Sophie said, and there was a hint of awe in her voice. You were scary. Good scary or bad scary? Good scary, like a superhero. Vivian laughed, the sound shaky with emotion. I don't know about that. You called me your daughter, Sophie whispered. Vivian pulled back and her eyes were wet. Yeah, I did. Is that okay? Sophie launched herself at Vivian so hard she nearly knocked them both over. Yes, she said fiercely. Yes, yes, yes. Adrian watched them hold each other in the school parking lot and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. This was real. Not someday. Not eventually. Right now, Vivian was Sophie's mother in every way that mattered, and Sophie knew it. They went home and made hot chocolate, even though it was the middle of the day. Sophie sat between them on the couch, still shaky from the adrenaline crash, while they talked about what had happened and why hitting wasn't okay even when someone was being cruel. What if he says mean things again? Sophie asked. Then you tell a teacher, Adrian said. Or you tell us and we'll handle it. But what if they don't stop him? Then I'll rain down legal hellfire on that school until they do, Vivian said calmly. But you let the adults handle it, okay? That's our job. Sophie nodded, somewhat reassured. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Adrian found Vivian in the kitchen, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You okay? He asked. I threatened a principal today. I know. It was incredible. Adrian, I'm serious. I went full psycho CEO on an elementary school administrator. You went full mother bear on someone who wasn't protecting your kid. There's a difference. Vivian turned to face him, and he could see the fear underneath the bravado. I called her my daughter, in front of the principal, before we've even talked about adoption or marriage or any of it officially. So what if I overstepped? What if you're not ready for that? What if Sophie wasn't ready, and I just forced it by saying it out loud? Adrian crossed the kitchen, framed her face with his hands. Did you see Sophie's reaction? Yes, but she was thrilled, Viv, because that's what she's been waiting to hear. That you're not just Daddy's girlfriend, that you're hers too. We've only been officially together for a month, and we've been a family for 6 years. Stop counting from the wrong starting point. Vivian closed her eyes. I was so angry when that principal tried to make Sophie feel guilty for defending us. When I thought about that little brat saying those things to her, I wanted to destroy him. Welcome to parenthood. It's basically just constant terror that someone's going to hurt your kid. How do you stand it? Badly most of the time. Adrian kissed her forehead. But it's easier with you here. Wam. They stood there in the kitchen for a long time, just holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the house settled around them. Eventually, Vivian pulled back. I think we should make it official, she said. Make what official? The adoption. I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to keep existing in this limbo where I'm her mother in every way except legally. Adrian's heart kicked against his ribs. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Today proved it. When that principal called and said Sophie was in trouble, I didn't think twice. I just knew I had to be there. Because she's mine, Adrian. She's been mine for years. I just want the paperwork to reflect reality. Okay, Adrian said. Then let's do it. Just like that? Just like that. Vivian let out a shaky laugh. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. They started the adoption process the following week. The lawyer they consulted was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. This is going to take time, she warned. Home studies, background checks, court appearances, probably 6 months minimum, possibly longer. That's fine, Vivian said, as long as it happens. What? And you understand that as a single father, Mr. Blake has full legal rights to make this decision. But the court will want to ensure this is in Sophie's best interest. It is, Adrian said firmly. Vivian's been in Sophie's life since she was born. She's more of a mother to her than most people with legal custody. The lawyer nodded, taking notes. We'll need character references, documentation of your relationship with the child, evidence of financial stability, though I don't think that will be an issue for you, Miss Sinclair. Vivian smiled wryly. No, probably not. And Sophie will need to be interviewed by a social worker. They'll want to hear from her directly that this is what she wants. She'll tell them, Adrian said. Trust me. They were right. When the social worker came to the house 2 weeks later, Sophie sat in the living room and answered every question with the kind of certainty that only 6-year-olds possessed. Do you want Miss Sinclair to be your legal mother? Yes. She's already my mom. I just want it to be official. How long has she been part of your life? Forever. Well, not forever, forever. But since I was really little. And how do you feel about her being in your house so much? Sophie looked at the social worker like she'd asked a stupid question. I feel happy. Why wouldn't I be happy? Some children struggle when a parent starts dating someone new. Miss Vivian isn't someone new. She's Miss Vivian. Sophie swung her legs from where she sat on the couch. And she loves me, and I love her, and I want her to adopt me so everyone knows she's my real mom. The social worker made notes, nodded, asked a few more questions. When she left, she told them she'd submit her recommendation to the court within a week. I think that went well, but she said to Adrian and Vivian at the door, Sophie's very clear about what she wants. That will carry weight with the judge. After she left, Sophie looked up at them with worried eyes. Left, did I do okay? She asked. Vivian scooped her up, even though she was getting too big for it. You did perfect, baby. So she's going to let you be my mom? It's not quite that simple, but yes, I think so. Sophie wrapped her arms around Vivian's neck. Good, because I already told Madison you were my mom and I don't want to be a liar. Adrian laughed despite himself. When did you tell Madison that? Last week. She said I was lucky to have two parents who love me. Her dad doesn't live with them anymore. The casual devastation of childhood loss delivered in the same tone as a weather report. Adrian and Vivian exchanged a look over Sophie's head. You are lucky, Vivian said quietly. We all are. The months that followed fell into a rhythm that almost felt sustainable. Vivian split her time between Portland and Seattle, flying out for crucial meetings but working remotely whenever possible. Adrian's studio started getting more commissions, word spreading that he was taking new clients again. Sophie thrived, growing more confident, more settled, like having two parents who were actually together had given her permission to just be a kid, instead of constantly worrying about the adults in her life. But nothing that good comes without complications. The first real test came in late November, when Vivian's mother announced she was coming to visit. Absolutely not, Vivian said into the phone, pacing the kitchen. Mother, I said no. I'm not. Yes, I understand you want to meet him, but no, that's not what I meant. Adrian watched from the doorway, trying to piece together the conversation from Vivian's half of it. Fine, Vivian said finally, her voice tight with frustration. Fine. You can come for Thanksgiving, but I'm warning you right now, if you say one word, one single word, to upset Sophie, you're leaving. I don't care if you just got here. She hung up and stood there, breathing hard. That sounded fun, Adrian said carefully. My mother is coming for Thanksgiving. I gathered that. Oh, she wants to meet you and Sophie. Apparently she's decided that if I'm throwing my life away for a man, she should at least assess the damage in person. She said that? Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. Vivian turned to face him. Adrian, I need you to understand something. My mother is difficult. She's going to judge everything. The house. Your job. The fact that Sophie isn't biologically mine. She's going to make comments, and they're going to hurt. And I need you to not take them personally. Should I be worried? Terrified, probably, but it's only for 3 days. We can survive anything for 3 days. They couldn't. Catherine Sinclair arrived the day before Thanksgiving in a town car that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was exactly what Adrian expected, perfectly coiffed, designer everything, the kind of woman who looked at his modest house like it was a quaint tourist attraction. So this is where you've been hiding, she said to Vivian, air-kissing both cheeks without actually making contact. I haven't been hiding, Mother. I've been living my life. Catherine's eyes swept over Adrian with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock auctions. You must be Adrian. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Sinclair. He held out his hand. She took it briefly, her grip limp and dismissive. And where's the child? Her name is Sophie, Vivian said coldly, and she's upstairs doing homework. At 6 o'clock? Shouldn't she be finished by now? She had a project due tomorrow. She's finishing it. Catherine made a non-committal sound and proceeded into the house like she owned it, immediately cataloging every flaw. The furniture was worn. The paint was outdated. The kitchen appliances were at least 10 years old. You've been living here? She asked Vivian. Yes, Mother. But why? You have a perfectly good penthouse in Seattle. Because my family is here. Catherine's eyes flicked to Adrian, then away. I see. Dinner that night was excruciating. Catherine asked invasive questions disguised as polite conversation. How much did Adrian make as an artist? Had he considered a more stable career? Did he have life insurance? What were his plans for Sophie's education? She's 6, Adrian said, trying to keep his voice level. We're focused on first grade right now. First grade is when you should be planning for college. I had Vivian enrolled in preparatory programs by age 5, spas. And look how well that turned out, Vivian muttered. What was that, dear? Nothing, Mother. Sophie, to her credit, was being remarkably well behaved. She answered Catherine's questions politely, didn't fidget too much, and only asked to be excused once she'd cleaned her plate. She's very small for her age, Catherine observed after Sophie left. She's perfectly healthy, Adrian said. I'm sure. I'm simply noting that good nutrition is important during developmental years. She eats fine, Vivian said, her voice dangerously quiet. The tension continued through dessert and into the evening. By the time Catherine retired to the guest room, the one Vivian had been using before she'd moved into Adrian's bedroom, the atmosphere in the house felt like a storm about to break. I'm sorry, Vivian said as soon as they were alone. I should have warned you she'd be like this. You did warn me. Well, not well enough. Vivian pressed her hands to her face. She's going to spend the next 3 days picking apart everything about our life, and I don't know if I can handle it without losing my mind. Adrian pulled her hands away from her face, held them in his. Then don't handle it. Tell her to leave. I can't do that. Why not? Because she's my mother. Because I've spent my whole life trying to prove to her that I'm capable and successful and worth her respect. And if I kick her out now, I'm admitting I can't even host her for a long weekend. Or you're admitting that you have boundaries and she crossed them. Vivian looked at him with tired eyes. You don't understand what she's like. I'm starting to get the picture. She's not going to approve of us, Adrian. She's going to spend 3 days cataloging every reason why this is a terrible idea. And then she's going to go home and tell everyone in her social circle that I've lost my mind. Do you care what those people think? No. But I care what she thinks. And I hate that I care. But I do. Adrian understood that. The desperate need for a parent's approval, even when you knew it would never come. The way it hollowed you out, left you performing for an audience that would never be satisfied. Then let her judge, he said. Let her catalog everything she thinks is wrong with our life. At the end of 3 days, she goes home and we're still here, still together, still happy. You think we can survive 3 days of her? I think we can survive anything. He was wrong. Thanksgiving Day started badly and got worse. Catherine criticized the turkey, too dry. The stuffing, too salty. The fact that they were eating at 2 in the afternoon instead of 6 in the evening like civilized people. Some of us have a 6-year-old who can't wait until 6 for dinner, Vivian said through gritted teeth. In my day, children learned patience. In your day, children were seen and not heard. We're doing things differently. Catherine's expression soured. Clearly. Sophie, who'd been quiet through most of the meal, finally looked up from her plate. Why don't you like us? She asked Catherine directly. The table went silent. Sophie, Adrian started. No, it's okay. Sophie set down her fork, looking at Catherine with those 2 old eyes. You've been here for 2 days and you haven't said one nice thing. About our house or Daddy's job or anything. So I'm wondering why you came if you don't even like us. Catherine's face went rigid. Young lady, that is extremely rude. So is being mean to people in their own house, Sophie shot back. Miss Vivian says you should always be kind, especially to people who are being kind to you, but you're not being kind. You're being mean. And I don't understand why. Sophie, apologize, Adrian said, though part of him wanted to applaud. No, Vivian said quietly. She doesn't need to apologize for speaking the truth. Catherine stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I will not sit here and be disrespected by a child. Then leave, Vivian said, standing as well. Because that child has more manners and grace in her little finger than you've shown in 2 days. Vivian Margaret Sinclair. I'm done, Mother. Vivian's voice was shaking but firm. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done pretending your opinion matters more than my own happiness. You've spent this entire visit trying to tear apart the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm done tolerating it. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to control me. The same way you've tried to control every aspect of my life since I was born. But I'm 30 years old, and I don't need your permission to be happy. Catherine's face went pale with fury. If you're choosing this ordinary little life over everything I've tried to give you, I am, Vivian said. without hesitation, because this ordinary little life has more love and authenticity in it than anything in your world ever did. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool who's happy than successful and miserable like you. The words landed like a slap. Catherine grabbed her purse from the counter. I'll be leaving first thing in the morning. Don't bother, Vivian said. I'll call you a car right now. She did. 20 minutes later, Catherine Sinclair was gone, leaving behind a tension so thick Adrian could barely breathe through it. Sophie looked between her father and Vivian, eyes wide. Did I make her leave? She asked in a small voice. No, baby, Vivian said, dropping to her knees in front of Sophie's chair. You didn't do anything wrong. My mother... Her voice cracked. My mother has a hard time accepting people who are different from what she expected. But that's her problem, not yours. Are you sad she left? No, Vivian said, and she sounded surprised by her own answer. I'm relieved. Adrian came around the table, put his hand on Vivian's shoulder. She reached up, covered his hand with hers, and they stood there like that, the three of them, holding on to each other in the wreckage of a holiday dinner, and somehow it felt more like family than anything Adrian had experienced in years. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Vivian broke down. Adrian found her in the bathroom, sitting on the floor with her back against the tub, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Hey, he said, sliding down beside her. Talk to me. She gasped for air. I just cut my mother out of my life. Not permanently. You just set a boundary. You don't understand. In my family, boundaries don't exist. You toe the line or you're out. Then maybe it's time to be out. Vivian looked at him with devastated eyes. She's my mother. Adrian, I know, but being someone's mother doesn't give them the right to destroy you. She's going to tell everyone, the board, the investors, everyone in her social circle. She's going to make sure the whole world knows I chose you over the life she wanted for me. Good, Adrian said. Let her tell them. Let everyone know you chose happiness over obligation. What if I'm making a mistake? Are you? Vivian was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Then she shook her head. No, I've never been more certain of anything, but it still hurts. Of course it hurts. She's your mother. You're allowed to grieve that relationship, even if it was toxic. How did you get so wise? 6 years of therapy after Emily died. It was either that or completely fall apart. Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know how to do this. How to have a family without her approval. Yes, you do. You've been doing it for weeks. That was different. That was before I had to choose between them. But you did choose, Adrian said gently. You chose us, and we're going to be right here, whether your mother approves or not. They sat on the bathroom floor until Vivian's tears stopped, until her breathing evened out, until she could stand up and wash her face and pretend she was okay. And maybe she wasn't okay yet, but she would be, because she had them, and they had her. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The adoption hearing was scheduled for March 15th, 4 months after Catherine's disastrous Thanksgiving visit. In those 4 months, Vivian had spoken to her mother exactly twice, both times brief, cold conversations about business matters that ended with Catherine hanging up before Vivian could say anything personal. She'll come around, Adrian said one night in February, watching Vivian stare at her phone like it might spontaneously ring. No, she won't. Vivian set the phone down. And I need to make peace with that. Have you? Getting there. She turned to face him. Some days I'm fine. Some days I want to call her and apologize for things I didn't do wrong. Today's one of the bad days. Adrian pulled her close. The hearing's in 3 weeks. Are you nervous? Terrified. What if the judge says no? They're not going to say no. The social worker's recommendation was glowing. Sophie's interview was perfect. We've done everything right. But what if it's not enough? Then we appeal, and we keep appealing until someone listens. He kissed the top of her head. You're going to be her mother legally, Viv. I promise. The night before the hearing, Sophie couldn't sleep. Adrian found her sitting on the stairs at midnight, clutching her stuffed elephant. What are you doing up? He asked, sitting down beside her. What if the judge doesn't like us? The judge is going to love you. But what if they say Miss Vivian can't be my mom? What if they say we have to wait longer, or that she's not allowed because she travels too much for work? Or, Sophie. Adrian put his arm around her. Take a breath. She did, shaky and uneven. Tomorrow you're going to walk into that courtroom and tell the judge the truth. That Vivian loves you, that you love her, and that you want her to be your mom. That's all you have to do. What if I mess it up? You won't. But what if I cry, or I forget what to say, or then you cry, and you figure out the words when you get there. There's no script for this, baby. You just have to be honest. Sophie leaned against his shoulder. I'm scared. Me too. Really? Really? But I'm also excited, because tomorrow our family becomes official. We're already a family. I know, but now everyone else will know it too. Bye. They sat on the stairs for a while longer, not talking, just being together in the quiet. Eventually, Sophie yawned. Ready for bed? Adrian asked. Can I sleep with you and Miss Vivian tonight? Yeah, Soph, come on. They climbed the stairs together, and Adrian tucked Sophie between them in the big bed. Vivian woke up enough to wrap an arm around Sophie, murmuring something incomprehensible, and Sophie settled immediately. Love you, Daddy, she whispered. Love you too, baby. Love you, Mom. The word hung in the air, tentative, testing, like Sophie was trying it on for size. Vivian's eyes opened fully, meeting Adrian's across Sophie's head. Love you too, sweetheart, Vivian whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. Sophie fell asleep between them, and Adrian lay awake for a long time thinking about how they'd gotten here. All the wrong turns and wasted years. All the fear that had kept him frozen. All the courage it had taken to finally choose happiness over safety. The courtroom was smaller than Adrian expected. Plain walls, fluorescent lighting, a judge who looked tired before the day even started. They sat in the front row, Adrian, Vivian, and Sophie, dressed in her nicest dress, legs swinging nervously. The judge reviewed the paperwork, asked a few preliminary questions. Then she looked at Sophie. Miss Blake, do you understand why we're here today? Sophie nodded. Miss Vivian wants to adopt me. And how do you feel about that? Happy. Excited. A little scared. The judge's expression softened slightly. What are you scared of? That you'll say no. Why would I say no? Sophie thought about it. Because maybe you think she shouldn't be my mom since she travels for work sometimes. Or because my real mom died and you think I should just remember her instead of having a new mom. Or because, Sophie, the judge interrupted gently. I'm not here to take anything away from you. I'm here to make sure this adoption is in your best interest. Do you understand what adoption means? It means Miss Vivian becomes my real mom, legally. So if something happens to Daddy, she can take care of me. And so people stop asking why she's not actually my mom when she does all the mom things. What kind of mom things does she do? Everything. She makes me breakfast and helps with homework and comes to my dance recitals. She knows I like my sandwiches cut diagonal, not straight across. She remembers that I get scared during thunderstorms. She bought me my nightlight and my favorite books, and she sings to me when I can't sleep. The judge was taking notes. It sounds like she's very involved in your life. She's not involved, she's just there. She's always been there. Sophie's voice got smaller. I don't really remember my first mom. I know Daddy loved her a lot, and I love her too because she made me. But Miss Vivian is the mom I know, the mom who raised me, and I want it to be official so people stop saying she doesn't count. Adrian felt his throat close up. Beside him, Vivian was crying silently, trying to hold it together. The judge looked at Vivian. Miss Sinclair, you understand that adoption is permanent? That you'll be legally responsible for Sophie's welfare, education, and well-being? Yes, Your Honor. And you're prepared for that responsibility? I've been preparing for it for 6 years. This just makes it official. You travel frequently for work. How will that impact your ability to parent? Vivian sat up straighter. I've restructured my entire company to work primarily from Portland. I still travel for crucial meetings, but no more than a few days a month, and only when absolutely necessary. My daughter, she caught herself. Sophie. Sophie comes first. She always has. The judge made more notes, asked more questions, reviewed the social worker's report, the character references, the documentation of Vivian's relationship with Sophie. The whole thing took maybe 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Finally, the judge set down her pen. Miss Blake, do you want Miss Sinclair to be your mother? Yes, Sophie said immediately. Are you sure? Because once this is finalized, it can't be undone. I'm sure. I've been sure since I was little. I just want everyone else to be sure too. The judge looked at the paperwork one more time, then she nodded. Based on the evidence presented and Sophie's clearly expressed wishes, I'm granting the petition for adoption. As of today, Vivian Sinclair is Sophie Blake's legal mother, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. The gavel came down. Sophie's face split into the biggest smile Adrian had ever seen. Vivian let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob, pulling Sophie into her arms. You're my mom, Sophie said, wonder in her voice. Really my mom? Really? Your mom, Vivian confirmed, tears streaming down her face. Adrian put his arms around both of them, and they stood there in the courtroom crying and laughing and holding on to each other like they'd never let go. Outside, the spring sun was warm on their faces. Sophie insisted on getting ice cream to celebrate, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. They went to the little shop on 4th Street, the one with the homemade waffle cones, and ate chocolate chip mint while sitting on a bench watching people pass by. Can I call you Mom now? Sophie asked Vivian. Instead of Miss Vivian? You can call me whatever feels right. Sophie considered this, licking her cone. Mom feels right. Then Mom it is. Cool. Sophie swung her legs, perfectly content. Madison's going to be so jealous. She said adoption takes forever, and we did it in like 6 months. 4 months, Adrian corrected. That's still pretty fast. Vivian laughed. It felt like an eternity. They finished their ice cream and walked home slowly, taking the long way through the park. Sophie ran ahead, burning off the nervous energy from the morning, while Adrian and Vivian followed hand in hand. We did it, Vivian said quietly. Yeah, we did. I can't believe it's real, that she's actually mine. She was always yours. This just makes it official. Vivian stopped walking, turned to face him. I want to get married. Adrian blinked. What? I want to marry you, not someday, not eventually. Soon. Viv, yet. I know we said we'd take it slow, that we'd date properly and make sure we work as a couple before making it permanent. But Adrian, we've been living together for 4 months. We share a bed. We share a daughter. We share a life. What are we waiting for? I don't know, Adrian admitted. Honestly, I've been waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready. I've been ready since Seattle. I just didn't want to push. So we're both idiots who've been waiting for each other. Apparently, Vivian smiled. So what do you say? Want to make this official too? Adrian kissed her right there in the park, with Sophie running circles around the playground in the background and early spring flowers blooming in the beds around them. Yes, he said against her mouth. Let's get married. They did it small. Just family and close friends in their backyard on a Saturday in June, 3 months after the adoption was finalized. Sophie stood between them as Adrian's best man and Vivian's maid of honor rolled into one, wearing a yellow dress she'd picked out herself. Rachel cried through the entire ceremony. Vivian's assistant flew in from Seattle and took about 1,000 photos. A few of Adrian's artist friends showed up with homemade decorations that were beautiful and slightly chaotic. Mrs. Chen from next door brought enough food to feed an army. Catherine Sinclair did not attend. Vivian had sent an invitation anyway, more out of obligation than hope. It went unanswered. Do you wish she was here? Adrian asked the morning of the wedding, watching Vivian stare at her phone. No, Vivian said, and she sounded like she meant it. I wished for it for a long time. Wished she could be happy for me. But I'm done wishing for things that aren't going to happen. No regrets? None. She set down her phone and smiled at him. I'm marrying the man I've loved since I was 22. I'm officially the mother of the most amazing little girl in the world. I have a career I love and a family I chose. Why would I regret any of that? The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, Simple promises that boiled down to the same thing. We're in this together, for real this time. No more hiding. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Sophie covered her eyes and made gagging sounds, which made everyone laugh. The reception was chaos in the best way. Dancing in the backyard. Sophie running around with the other kids until she was covered in grass stains. Adrian's artist friends arguing about technique while slightly drunk. Rachel cornering Vivian to tell her that if she ever hurt Adrian, there would be consequences. "I know," Vivian said, amused. "You've mentioned it several times. I'm serious. He's been through enough." "I know. So have I." Vivian glanced across the yard to where Adrian was attempting to teach Sophie and 3 other kids some kind of complicated dance move. "But we're through it now, both of us." Rachel followed her gaze and softened. "You're good for him. For both of them. They're good for me too." As the sun set and the party wound down, Adrian found Vivian sitting on the back steps, shoes off, watching the last few guests filter out. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. "More than okay." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "This is exactly what I wanted. Nothing fancy, just us and the people we love." "No regrets about the billionaire wedding your mother probably would have insisted on?" "None. This is perfect." Sophie appeared in the doorway behind them, still in her yellow dress, but with her hair coming loose from its braid. "Are you guys being gross?" she asked. "Probably," Adrian said. "Good. Madison says married people are supposed to be gross." Sophie squeezed between them on the step. "Can I ask you something?" "Always," Vivian said. "Now that you're married, are we going to have a baby?" Both adults froze. "What makes you ask that?" Adrian managed. "Madison's mom just had a baby, and Emma in my class is getting a baby brother, and I thought maybe we could have one too." Vivian and Adrian looked at each other over Sophie's head, and they talked about it vaguely in the abstract way people discuss future possibilities. But hearing it from Sophie made it suddenly terrifyingly real. "Would you want a baby brother or sister?" Vivian asked carefully. Sophie thought about it. "Maybe, if they don't cry too much, and if I can teach them stuff." "That's a big responsibility." "I know, but I'm 7 now. I'm old enough." "You're 6 3/4, Adrian corrected. "Same thing." Sophie yawned, leaning against Vivian. "So are we going to have a baby?" "Maybe someday," Vivian said, "but not right now. Right now we're still figuring out being a family of 3. "Okay." Sophie yawned again. "Can I go to bed? I'm really tired." They put her to bed together, taking turns reading from the chapter book she'd been working through. By the time they got to the end of the chapter, she was asleep, one hand still clutching Vivian's. "She asked about a baby," Adrian said later when they were finally alone in their own room. "I know." "What do you think?" Vivian was quiet for a long time. "I think I spent so many years believing I'd never have this. A husband, a daughter, a real family, that I'm almost afraid to want more." "But do you? Want more?" "Yeah," she said softly. "I do. Not right away, but someday. If you do." "I do." Adrian pulled her close. "But you're right. Let's get used to being married first." "Deal." Someday came sooner than expected. 8 months later, Vivian was pregnant. It wasn't planned exactly, but it wasn't prevented either. They'd been careless one night, too caught up in each other to think about consequences. And 3 weeks later, Vivian was staring at a positive pregnancy test in their bathroom at 6 in the morning. "Adrian," she called, her voice shaking. He appeared in the doorway, toothbrush in hand. "What's wrong?" She held up the test. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he set down the toothbrush, crossed the bathroom, and pulled her into his arms. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know. Are you?" Terrified, excited, completely overwhelmed. "Same." Vivian pulled back to look at him. "This is crazy, right? We've been married less than a year. Sophie's barely adjusted to the adoption. This is terrible timing." "Probably. And I'm 31. I've never been pregnant before. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm terrible at it? Then we'll figure it out, same way we figured out everything else." Vivian pressed her face into his chest. "I'm scared." "Me too. But we've got this." They told Sophie that weekend, sitting her down in the living room with the same seriousness they'd used to explain the adoption. "So remember how you asked about having a baby brother or sister?" Adrian started. Sophie's eyes went wide. "Are we getting one?" "Yeah, Soph, Vivian's pregnant." The scream Sophie let out probably violated several noise ordinances. She launched herself at Vivian, hugging her around the middle with enough force to nearly knock them both over. "I'm going to be a big sister." "You are," Vivian confirmed, laughing. "When? How long do we have to wait? Can I tell Madison? Is it a boy or a girl?" "We don't know yet. It's really early. The baby won't be here until next spring." Sophie did the math in her head. "That's like 9 months. About that, yeah. That's forever. It'll go faster than you think." It did and it didn't. The pregnancy was rough. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made working impossible. Anxiety that kept Vivian up at night worrying about everything that could go wrong. Adrian did his best to help, taking over more of the household responsibilities, keeping Sophie occupied when Vivian needed to rest, holding her hair back when she got sick. "I don't know how women do this," Vivian groaned one night in her second trimester, lying on the couch with her feet in Adrian's lap. "You're doing great." "I threw up 4 times today and cried watching a commercial about laundry detergent. That's not great. That's hormonal chaos." "Still great." Sophie appeared in the doorway holding a drawing. "I made this for the baby." She held it up, a family portrait with stick figures. Adrian and Vivian and Sophie, and a tiny blob labeled baby brother or sister. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Vivian said. "That's tearing up immediately. See? Laundry detergent commercial. I'm a mess." "You're perfect," Adrian said, squeezing her foot. The baby, a boy, was born on a rainy March morning, 3 weeks early, and screaming loud enough to wake the entire maternity ward. They named him James, after Emily's father, with the middle name Oliver because Vivian had always loved it. Sophie met him 2 hours after he was born, tiptoeing into the hospital room like she was afraid of breaking something. "He's so small," she whispered, staring at the bundle in Vivian's arms. "You were smaller when you were born." "Really? Really? You were tiny. This guy's actually pretty big for being early." Sophie reached out carefully, touching one of James's small hands. His fingers wrapped around hers reflexively, and her face lit up. "He's holding my hand." "He is," Vivian said softly. "I think he already knows his big sister." They brought James home 3 days later, and the house erupted into beautiful, exhausting chaos. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, Sophie wanting to help with everything but being too rough, too loud, too excited. Vivian trying to balance a newborn with work calls and failing miserably. Adrian running on coffee and adrenaline and love. It was messy and imperfect and nothing like the polished family portraits people posted on social media. It was real. 2 months in, Vivian had a breakdown. Adrian found her in the nursery at 3 in the morning, James asleep in the crib, while she sat on the floor crying. "I can't do this," she said when Adrian sat beside her. "I thought I could, but I can't. I'm failing at work because I can't focus. I'm failing at being a mom because I'm too tired to think straight. James cries, and I don't know what he needs. Sophie's acting out because she's not getting enough attention. I'm drowning, Adrian, and I don't know how to fix it." "You're not drowning. You're adjusting." "It doesn't feel like adjusting. It feels like falling apart, Em." Adrian pulled her close. "You know what I realized when Emily died? That falling apart is sometimes the only way to put yourself back together the right way. You're not failing, Viv. You're figuring it out, and you don't have to figure it out alone. You're already doing everything. Then we'll get help. We'll hire a nanny for a few months while you get back on your feet. We'll talk to Sophie's about being patient. We'll figure out a schedule that works. But you're not failing. You're human. Why des discuss? I'm supposed to be better at this." "Why?" "Because you run a billion-dollar company. Being a CEO doesn't prepare you for a 2-month-old who won't sleep. It just means you're good at spreadsheets and board meetings." Vivian laughed despite herself, then started crying harder. "I love him so much it scares me. What if something happens? What if I mess him up? Then we'll mess him up together, and he'll go to therapy like everyone else." They hired help. Not a lot, just someone to come in a few afternoons a week to give Vivian time to breathe. They talked to Sophie about expectations, about how babies take up a lot of time, But that didn't mean they loved her any less. They figured out a rhythm that almost worked, and when it didn't work, they adjusted. And slowly, gradually, the chaos settled into something manageable. By James's first birthday, they'd found their footing. Sophie was 8 and thriving, her dance recitals getting more elaborate, her reading level ahead of her class. James was walking and getting into everything, babbling in a language only he understood. Vivian had restructured her company again, delegating more, trusting her team to handle things she used to micromanage. And Adrian was painting again, not just commissions, real art, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than technical skill. Pieces about family and loss and the messy process of rebuilding. His first gallery show in 7 years opened in October. Vivian stood in front of one of the paintings, a portrait of her and Sophie from years ago, before they'd admitted what they were to each other. Sophie was 6 in the painting, laughing at something off canvas, and Vivian was watching her with an expression Adrian had captured perfectly. Love mixed with longing, mixed with the desperate hope that someday this could be real. "When did you paint this?" Vivian asked quietly. 5 years ago. I never showed it to anyone." "Why not?" "Because it felt too personal, like I was exposing something I wasn't ready to name." Vivian studied the painting, and Adrian watched her eyes fill with tears. "You loved me even then." "Even then." She turned to look at him. "We wasted so much time." "No," Adrian said. "We took the time we needed to get here. Maybe it wasn't efficient. Maybe we could have done it faster. But this is where we ended up, and I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the 6 years of being miserable. Not even that. Because those 6 years taught me what I was afraid of losing. They taught me that survival isn't the same as living. And when I finally found the courage to choose you, I knew exactly what I was choosing." Vivian kissed him right there in the gallery, surrounded by paintings that told the story of their family in brushstrokes and color. Later that night, after the show closed and the guests filtered out, they went home to their house that was too small and too cluttered and absolutely perfect. Sophie was asleep on the couch, worn out from the evening. James was in his crib, one hand clutching the stuffed elephant Vivian had bought him. Adrian and Vivian stood in the hallway between the kids' rooms, just watching them sleep. "You know what I realized tonight?" Vivian said softly. "What, Mom?" "That happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you choose over and over, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Adrian understood. They'd both spent so many years chasing some perfect version of happiness. Vivian through success and achievement, Adrian through the safety of grief. And they'd both been miserable. It wasn't until they'd stopped chasing and started choosing each other, this messy, imperfect family, the hard work of showing up every day, that they'd actually found it. "I'm glad we chose this," Adrian said. "Me too." "Oui, et toi-ti, taiki." They stood there a while longer, listening to their children breathe, holding hands in the dark hallway. And Adrian thought about the single father he'd been 6 years ago, so buried in loss he couldn't see a way forward. About the billionaire woman who'd loved him in silence, waiting for him to be ready. About the little girl who'd been brave enough to ask the question that changed everything. About the choice, terrifying and necessary, to let go of the past and build something new. Some people wait their whole lives for permission to be happy, for the right moment, for circumstances to align perfectly. Adrian had done that for 6 years, and all it had gotten him was lonely. But choosing happiness before you felt ready, before you were sure it would work, before all the pieces fell into place, that was what real courage looked like. And maybe the point wasn't to get it right the first time. Maybe the point was to keep choosing, keep trying, keep building something worth having even when it felt impossible. Vivian squeezed his hand in the darkness, and Adrian squeezed back. They were home. Finally, completely, imperfectly home. And that was enough. Sonnet 4.5. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check respond.